Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Focused on that particular branch because if you notice, the leaves are changing. We're going into another fall. Very soon, all these leaves are going to come down. It's pretty early, but it's inevitable. The time happens. And that's the focus of this episode. Time changing. The current age is running out. We have seen capitalism reach its highest heights. Consumerism is at a rate unheard of by our predecessors. We carry technological marvels around with us in our pockets. And now the question is, we're going to decide the destiny of humanity for the next couple hundred years. One of the things we have to do is start accepting nuclear power is not the boogeyman it is being made out to be. 3 Mile Island was horrific, but at the same token, it failed to specifications. Everything got shut down, everything happened the way it should. Chernobyl, that was a case of improper maintenance and trying to run an experiment that was unauthorized. You push any reactor beyond its limits, and bad things happen. The Japanese nuclear reactor meltdown was a result of not retiring a reactor when it was supposed to be. Fukushima was already ancient. It had been refurbished so that way it can continue to supply power. But it was never meant to last that long. So when the hurricane hit it, it kind of only accelerated the damage that was already being done. I'm going to stay here on my nuclear platform for a second. There have not been many nuclear accidents, particularly compared to, say, the BP, British Petroleum, what was it, the Deep Underwater Explorer that dumped how many billions of gallons of crude oil into the Caribbean? Yeah, that's a disaster. But the difference is, we're used to oil in our lives. It's not a surprise that when we take a match and put it on oil, that the oil starts to burn a little bit. Because we've been dealing with oil a hell of a lot longer. Nuclear technology is still new and untried. My family does have some experience with this. Silverlight's grandfather was among the first to put a toilet inside. Oh yes. And when he put it in, people thought he was nuts. Whoa, where's the sewer gas going to go? Oh, that's going to smell horrible, etc., etc. Except my grandfather was a clever man. He understood tools, he understood technology, and he was the first adopter. And soon, most everybody in the town went from an outhouse to an indoor toilet. But sewer gas can still potentially kill people. That's why on your toilet there's a trap to prevent the sewer gas from getting out. This also applies to nuclear materials. Now we're getting closer and closer to fusion, which has a lot of benefits, but I'm going to talk exclusively about fission. Fusion is when you take two heavy particles and merge them together to generate energy. That's exactly what we do with the sun. Fission is when you take a super heavy element, like uranium, and break it in half, thus releasing energy. The crappy part to these technologies, at least the way that they are currently used, well, there's several things. But first of all, do you want to know how we get power from a nuclear reactor? We have technology so advanced that it would fit an extraterrestrial civilization And what do we do with it? All that energy, the same energy that fires the sun, the same energy that can keep a space probe functioning for years, we boil water and drive a turbine. That's right, we are using nuclear rods to boil water. This is completely unacceptable. There has to be somebody out there looking at a way to directly pull energy from an energy source that big, whether it's a solar panel of some description or, just having a magnetic trap so that it sucks the electrons in, and then you just get power from that in addition to boiling the water. So that part of nuclear energy is wasteful. But compared to an oil plant, a coal plant, even with all our pollution controlling technologies, uranium is cleaner. And you know what's even cleaner than uranium? Thorium. The CANDU nuclear reactors can run off thorium. Now, the thorium design is slightly more complicated than a uranium reactor, but it has two main advantages. You can't weaponize thorium, or at least you can't do it very easily. Whereas uranium, when it breaks down, it produces plutonium. And plutonium is used to make nuclear bombs. This is how I know some nations are not serious about power generation. Everybody says, we need a nuclear plant. Nuclear pants, that's a good name for a rock band. We need a nuclear plant. I did it again. Nuclear plant to generate electricity. And if they're not using a CANDU reactor, which does not use enriched uranium, and if they're not using thorium, they're probably using a breeding reactor, which is going to produce plutonium. Those were the first reactors invented. Now, what does this all have to do with humanity's future? Well, first of all, we're not even able to provide the energy requirements we need for our present population. And it's only going to get worse. People are going to be giving cell phones and computers to their kids. Old people are going to start carrying them around. My father already has, it's not quite an Apple Watch, but the same idea. And it not only performs all the functions, but it also checks his heart, checks his pulse, all that sort of thing. You think that technology is going to go away? Heck no, it's going to get better because we have an aging population. So we need more ways to look after people. We need more and more power to look after the people that we have. And unfortunately, solar and wind simply cannot do it. We also have to start thinking about our destiny. Right now, ever since the 1960s, to my knowledge, they've been proposing nuclear spacecraft. And they're saying, this thing will get us to Mars in weeks or months instead of years. That's pretty positive. But you have the environmental activists justifiably objecting and saying, what happens if one of the rockets explodes? It's a valid criticism. I give them that. That being said, we're getting pretty darn good at throwing things into space. And if we simply used a modular approach, by modular I mean you send some pieces up on one rocket and some pieces up on the other and assemble them in space, you kind of get around that whole problem about, if this blows up, all this crazy crap goes everywhere. Now, it's a bit radical, and I don't have enough experience with what a spacewalker can do as far as assembly goes. They built the ISS, and it took them years. So maybe we need to start thinking about that, assembling humanity's first starships. But Silverlight, I hear you say, why are we going to waste our money on that? Because, as they said in that old movie, if you build it, they will come. If we could figure out a regular schedule, kind of like a bus, where people knew that there would be transfers to Mars every so often, people would be more willing to live there. Now, the return voyages, I don't know how you make them profitable. Some people go to Mars to visit, but a lot of people go to Mars for a second chance. A lot of people live on the moon just because it's a way to get off the planet. So it expands humanity's frontiers, and most importantly, it makes us more survivable. 65 million years ago, an asteroid, among other things, hit the Earth and wiped out the dinosaurs. The asteroid may have actually triggered a chain reaction of volcanoes and everything else, but the dinosaurs weren't coming back from it. Now, we're pretty smug in our 21st century technology, sitting in our beautifully air-conditioned and heated homes, thinking, oh, that's not so bad. Well, yeah, it would be bad. People would probably survive, but it would be hellish, to say the least. A couple series, Star Blazers, the old cartoon and the movie, and Babylon 5, A Call to Arms, which was the prequel to Excalibur, dealt with the possibility of an alien race spreading a disease, a contagion on Earth. So Earth had to be quarantined, and all the other human settlements had to look after them and find a cure. Now, I find this concept interesting. I highly doubt an alien civilization would actually do this, but given that we just got out of a 2-year pandemic, it sounds like a technology that would be extremely beneficial, not only to give how I want to call them poor countries, and that seems to do a disservice to them, but countries where there aren't a lot of opportunities, people would be able to go. Because, as Elon Musk said, there is a historical precedent for this. You sign a contract saying when you get to Mars, you will work for 10 years for the corporation, building stuff, you will be fed, you will be clothed, you will be housed, you'll be working 10, 12-hour shifts, whatever it might be. It's not going to be easy, but this is what they did with colonists coming to the New World, and not the ones that they had on the sugar plantations. That was an entirely different thing. Slavery is not what I am talking about. I'm talking about a contract where you work 5, 10, 20 years, because I can't tell you what the contract will be. I don't know what labor's value will be, and I don't know how much it costs to go to Mars. But there will be a correlation there that they'll be able to say, yes, maybe you'll be able to do it just so that you can get your family living there, just like the colonists did in the olden days. And kind of like we do now when immigrants come over. You're required to have some sort of a job or a reference or sponsor so that you can come over to the country. In other words, you have to have that money to come here, and if not, you're going to be sponsored by a corporation who has a contract with you that you will work 3, 5 years, whatever. And then it's up to you if you decide to apply for citizenship. It's not really so different. Codifying it and saying, oh, you're working in servitude to this corporation, yes, that sounds very bad. But if you show it as an immigration practice, even though it's the same basic principle, it doesn't sound as bad. Now, a problem with this, aside from the environmental concerns, which I wish to admit are valid, we've had a few very, very poorly managed launches. And I understand why there's some trepidation there, because you never know which is going to be the bad one. I keep saying I really hope that SpaceX and Blue Origin and places like that don't get careless, because their public image is going to shape policy for centuries to come. But we have to start thinking, what do we want the human species to be? Yes, it's great to sit here on the planet and charge people $3 for a bottle of water that you poured out of a tap. Yes, it's great that we have houses like that little one that I focused on that are worth $1 million. And no, I am not kidding you. One in this area went for almost $1 million not too long ago. So the only opportunity, as the old saying goes, is to build vertically. But instead of an apartment building, I'm talking building vertically into the sky. We need space stations. We need colonies. And yes, it's going to be expensive to set them up. But the beautiful part is when you do it right, the colonies are self-sustaining. That was the thing that the Vikings unfortunately did very poorly. In Vineland, North America, and there's a lot of North America that term covers, and in Greenland, the colonists were very dependent on the ships coming from home. And when a mini ice age happened, that was not possible. Whereas when the first colonies of the United States were set up, it was expected that they were not only going to be self-sufficient, but profitable. They were going to get goods from the old world, and they were going to trade them for resources from the new world. Now, we can't follow the exact blueprints, because even if you load a rocket ship full of gold and bring it down in the atmosphere, well, first of all, there's the problem of weight. Once you come down the gravity well, it gets pretty expensive. Secondly, there's other substances that are worth their weight in gold and are much less heavy than gold. But space and weight are severe limitations on what you can transport back and forth. It's not like a sailing ship where anything you can cram on the hold, the ship is pretty much going to take it. I know that's not exactly how it works. It's just a quick back-of-the-napkin example. But most importantly, you set up the infrastructure for the future. We are poor at building infrastructure. In the 1920s to about the 1960s, they were all about building infrastructure. If you build it, they will come. They were putting power lines through, deserts and forests and stuff like that. They were building water lines through them. It was all because the government said, hey, we knew this is going to happen. Someone's going to use this eventually. We stopped doing that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s because politicians realized, hey, I got a 4-year term. I'm only guaranteed that 4-hour term. So therefore, why am I building something that the person who comes after me gets credit for? Again, they've become capitalists, but their capital is their personal fame. After all, that's how you get elected. But capitalism in itself is not really an inventive entity. Most of the inventions come from schools, from science programs, from government think tanks like NASA, where they issue tenders, cut checks, and then once they've developed something, a private industry says, ooh, that's a good idea, we'll buy the rights to that. And that's how universities get funding, and also how private industries start producing new contracts. There are very few corporations that have any sort of research and development to them. Quite the opposite. It's usually quite a big deal for you to get your boss to upgrade to the latest software. But that's the point. The industry isn't going to build itself. There are private industries starting to build that infrastructure. The government is interested in building the infrastructure. But we always have to be building the next generation's infrastructure. We can't let it slide, because we have let it slide. And that's why not everybody gets high-speed internet, because the fiber optic cable comes to that box down the street, but it doesn't come to your house. But anyways, so the point is, we're at a crossroads. We have the capacity to improve humanity's future, but are we willing to be brave enough to make it happen? I hope we are, because that would generate a whole lot of revenue and a whole lot of income that, quite frankly, is now being tied up in multi-billionaires' bank accounts. We wish to thank you for joining us for this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe. Don't forget to buy one of the books listed in the comments, down in the comments section. There's a link. There's 6 books there, including our latest release, Summerland, Another World, which is the first of a series for 9 years old and up, plus Family to Services, which we released last year, and all sorts of other books that you might find interesting. and we hope you have a wonderful day.